meeting will now come to order. Welcome to the December 19th, 2022 City of Asheville Board of Adjustment meeting. My name is Paul Wilczynski and I am the Vice Chair of this board. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body that is governed by the North Carolina General Statutes and the city's Unified Development Ordinance. We are authorized to hear requests for variances from the city's Unified Development Ordinance, also referred to as the UDO, appeals from final determinations made by city officials charged with enforcement of the city's UDO, requests for reasonable accommodations, and other requests as may be provided in the city's ordinance. The first agenda item is the review and adoption of the minutes from November 2022. Since we do not have them available, we will postpone the review and adoption until the next meeting at which they are available. We now begin the evidentiary hearings for the case listed on the agenda. In hearing cases, the board conducts a quasi-judicial evidentiary hearing. That means it is like a court hearing. State law sets specific procedures and rules concerning how this board must make its decisions. These rules are different from some other types of land use decisions like rezoning cases, which are legislative in nature. This board's decisions are constrained by the standards in the city's ordinances and the facts presented at the hearing. The board hears and considers evidence presented at the hearing and applies the standards set forth in state law and the city's ordinance. The board must base its decisions upon competent, material, and substantial evidence presented at the hearing. If you will be speaking as a witness, please focus on the facts and standards, not personal preference or opinion. Participation is limited. This meeting is open to the public. Everyone is welcome to watch. Parties have rights to participate fully. Parties may present evidence, call witnesses, and make legal arguments. Witnesses may testify as to facts to which they are competent to testify, so long as those facts relate to the legal standards. In addition, lay or non-expert witness testimony is limited to facts, not opinions. For certain topics, this board needs to hear opinion testimony from expert witnesses. These topics include projections about impacts on property values and projections about impacts on traffic safety. For our variance requests, 4 of the board members must testify in favor. For all other hearings and matters, including the adoption of the minutes, the decision will be made by a simple majority vote of the board. Witnesses must swear or affirm their testimony. At this time, we will administer the oath for all individuals who intend to provide witness testimony. So if you're going to testify or you think there's any chance you're going to testify, would you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence you shall give to the board in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Our first and only matter, the owner, South Slope Apothecary Real Estate LLC, and applicant, Nathaniel Webster of ARCA Design PLLC, are requesting a variance to the floodplain development standards for substantial improvement for commercial structures found in section 712(1)(e)(2)(b), flood hazard reduction specific standards, non-residential construction of the Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO. The owner and applicant is also seeking a variance to allow for the substantial improvement to 2 historic structures at 2 and 6 Brook Street, pin 9648-60-9201, without fully complying with the flood protection standards. We'll be voting on both of those requests together. Nancy Watford will be presenting.
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. I'm Nancy Watford. I'll be Stormwater Supervisor in Development Services, and I'll be presenting the 2 and 6 Brook Street flood variance today. We don't see flood variances very often, so I was going to walk you through a little bit of the process and procedure most of which has kind of already occurred. As part of the application, there are additional special requirements that are required both as part of the application and a report from the floodplain administrator that address items A through G. Nope. Sorry. These are the ones that they have to address for granting the variance. And then there's additional prerequisites that they address to as part of the application. And then as the floodplain administrator reviews the application, addresses those same prerequisites. Which must be those. No. Anyway, they're included in your packet. And that's just part of the review of the application to make sure that we're maintaining consistency in our review with the flood ordinance and as the project specifically applies to the flood ordinance. So the applicant demonstrated A through F as part of their application. And then additionally, also for granting the variance, it's consistent with also the 4 regular requirements for granting variances within the UDO. Does that make any sense? Okay.
Yep.
So in summary, they are requesting, Arca Design and the owners are requesting relief from the substantial improvement, which is 50% of the building value in terms of an improvement for the flood variance that would then require the structure to be brought up to new construction standards, which is elevating or flood protecting 2 feet above the base flood elevation. And so they're requesting relief from that to basically, and in the floodplain administrator's report, you'll see, to exceed the 50%, and then they are proposing to protect, so they're pre-flood buildings, so pre-firm buildings, which means that those buildings existed before flood mapping occurred. And so, and they're on the historic registry and also contributing structures within our local Biltmore Village Historic District. As part of this, there's no increase to danger of life, property, or materials swept into floodwaters because buildings exist now, and what they're proposing to do will actually increase some of the protection of the buildings, but not fully comply with new construction standards. The building's contents would be no more susceptible to flood damage as they are currently, and they are proposing to elevate one of the floors in in 2 Brook Street, elevate the floor height an additional 1.9 inches, which will help increase the flood protection of the FFE, or the finished floor elevation, as well as flood protect all of the equipment. So they're elevating all of the equipment to meet current new flood standards so that all the equipment will be elevated or flood protected based on building code. And having a backwater preventer on the sewer, which are, so the buildings are required to meet the historic district requirements, regardless of use. And so HRC, in the packet you have your certificate of appropriateness, and that one of the key things to remember is that there are not variances from HRC.
So could you repeat that?
There are no variances to the Historic Resources Commission designation, so the certificate of appropriateness. So, and then part of the flood requirements is that if they do, is that they have to maintain the historical designation if the variance is granted.
So the 2 go hand in hand.
Yes. A lot of communities don't do this through the floodplain administrator. City of Asheville chose to do it through Board of Adjustments as a process to kind of maintain.
Would you do me a favor? Would you speak up just a little
Sorry.
bit?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, so here's the location. This is 2, technically 4 and 6 Brook Street. There are only 2 buildings. Building 2 has 2 units, address 2 and 4. In the historic documents, you will see that they've been addressed different addresses throughout the years. But they're the same buildings. And this is them in the historic district. They are CI zoning, right? And the aerial photo. And this is the floodplain designation. That blue and white striped is a floodway non-encroachment area. And then the blue area is all of the regulatory floodplain, which is the 100-year floodplain. The base flood elevation is 1999.5, which makes the regulatory design flood elevation 2001.5. This is the street view, and it's both of those structures. And then here we have the historic designation. This is the National Historic Registry designation for 3 and 1.5 Brook Street, which are these same buildings as commercial or Biltmore Village commercial structures, and our local designation as well. These are the building plans presented by the applicant. They are elevating the floor in. I didn't do anything. There we go. Okay.
Don't touch anything.
They're elevating the floor in building A, which is the 1.9 feet. And then there's a small new connector that's going to go through and connect to building B, which is all approved through HRC as well. And that new connector will be flood-proofed and designed with flood-resistant materials as new construction. So it's really just the expenditure of over 50%. So, and then this is the maps, the exhibit maps. This was also on their plan set. So this is their elevation where the surveyor went and noted the flood elevation and the finished. Did they note the finished floor? I know we have it. Yes, 1994.
Or the finished floor is 1994?
Currently.
Yep.
And then the FEMA flood maps. And then this is the certificate of appropriateness for the renovations of both buildings and adding that the connector piece in between the 2 buildings. I think that's it. So do you all have any questions for me or the other subject experts in the room? So we do have the historic resources. Alex is here from Historic Resources, and the architect is here as well.
I did have one quick question. So the one building that they are raising up a little bit, is that because they have the floor to ceiling clearance height to be able to try to comply a little bit further? So they're bringing it as much into compliance as they can. Since it's a single story structure, they really don't have any leeway as to raise it up. And so that's why we're here. Maybe,
Yes. I mean, I think it's a 1.5 story,
It has a second.
Oh, it does?
but it has enough clearance in it to be able to elevate the floor without compromising the Florida height ceiling requirement for a habitable structure.
Structure, okay.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Watford?
Oh, I had one other question. So since this property has been, the structure has been in the floodplain for years, when they're doing their flood mapping, it's always been, I'm not sure what the term is.
Mapped.
It is mapped, and it's always been an infringement or a...
Illegal non-conforming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Conforming structure that's always been in existence, so,
Yeah, that's why they call them pre-firm structures.
okay.
Which have different regulations than new construction or ones that were built after certain mapping. We have different reiterations of maps, different mapping periods.
So since the dawn of time, it's been viewed as a...
Pre-firm.
And because it's more than 50% increase in value, then it has to conform to the floodplains.
Yes, so in our,
Yeah.
right, in our flood ordinance, if a person is to renovate a home or structure and spend 50% or greater of the current building value on that structure, they have to bring it into current flood, new construction standards, which is what they're requesting relief from.
Relief from the current.
From, yes,
As opposed to. Okay, thank you.
Do we know the
From the new
significance of-
construction standard.
from the new construction standards.
Do we know the significance of the 50%? I mean, I know you didn't write.
That is set by federal code, CR something or another,
Oh,
federal code,
okay.
FEMA.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Watford? Thank you.
Sure.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to testify or take questions?
I'm the applicant and architect. I just wanted to make myself available for questions if there were any additional.
Could you identify yourself?
Yeah, Nathaniel Webster of Arca Design.
I did have one question. If you're raising that one structure up a foot and however many inches, is there any kind of handicap accessibility issues that you're...
That's one of the benefits of raising it actually, because the two existing buildings have two different levels. So the building at Six Brook is currently 1.9 feet higher. So the raising the building at 2 to 4 up, that helps the flood resistance of the building, but it also improves the accessibility between the two buildings.
Definitely between the two, but what about the entrances? Or the
The-
entrances level and one goes down? Or?
Yeah, so the way that we're designing it, we'll still provide the required accessible entrances into the building on the left. There is currently not an accessible entrance into Six Brook.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was wondering. Okay, great.
And the one you're raising is the one on the left that you have building A? Is that the one you're
Correct.
raising? Okay.
Correct.
Is there any perceived risk for, for changing the structure?
And sorry, can you repeat that?
Is there any increased risk for changing the structure? Perceived?
No. I mean, but you mean the change of the use of the structures? No. I mean, it will be modifying the life safety and the exiting because it'll be going from mercantile to a combination of mercantile and assembly. But the modifications that have been approved under the certificate of appropriateness will meet any of the requirements for the North Carolina State Building Code.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Webster? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the board, I understand we have a member of the Historic Resources Commission who is available to testify. Does anyone have any questions for?
I had a general question.
Oh. Is it for the HRC?
Yes.
Who's it for?
It's for Alex Cole.
Okay.
Hi.
Could you identify yourself?
Yes, I'm Alex Cole. I am the city staff liaison to the Historic Resources Commission. Not actually a member of the commission, just staff.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
So I had a question, and this is more general, but if they wanted to just scrap these two structures, would they have to come to HRC in order to get a demolition permit?
Yes.
And most likely they would not, that would not be something that would be granted?
They would most likely deny a request to demolish these buildings. However, in North Carolina, they can only stay a demolition for up to a year. So they could deny it with the intent of trying to find some alternative to demolition for that window of time. But obviously, if that, that expires, then the person would be able to demolish the building. But we haven't had that happen in my time here. But yes, theoretically, someone could propose to demolish, but it would be subject to review by the HRC.
That was the only question that I had. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thanks.
Well, I'm not sure even how to ask this or whether I should ask it, but is the HRC, I mean, you want to save the buildings, right? You don't want the buildings to be torn down. So is there a balance here for, that's why they're here, I realize that, but from the HRC, from their perspective?
So the whole goal of a historic district overlay is to preserve the historic character of the existing historic buildings within that area. And so each district has their own set of design standards, and in order for changes like this to be approved by the HRC, they have to meet the adopted standards. And currently, we do not have standards that really speak to flood. They're more design specific. There are some communities, like you think of like Charleston, where it's like chronic flooding is, it's super common, where they may work on developing standards that speak to elevating buildings from their, base footprint. But we don't have those kinds of standards here. So for now, the standards read that, these are the XYZ ways we can, control the, maintaining the historic character or making sure it's maintained. So there's not like basically, and I'll let Eric could probably speak to this, but it's not necessarily that the district standards or design standards trump all, but essentially they, kind of are the overruling factor here. So this is a great example to me of when a variance should be approved, because they basically, if they had to, meet the current new construction floodplain standards, they wouldn't be able to meet the requirements of the design standards. So
That was what I was looking for.
okay, sure. Any other questions?
Is there any risk to public for doing this?
No, I don't think so. I don't know if Nancy can, because I'm not a flood or stormwater person, so that my kind of limit is really the design part of things. So I suppose there could be more of a risk of.
Something for Nancy to answer, I guess.
I can address that one. Not really, because they're currently occupied, they're currently retail spaces, they're currently commercial spaces. So they aren't proposing anything that would increase that risk for public safety from they're not adding sleeping rooms below base flood elevation, which is one of our critical things that increase risk. Other than that, they're elevating their equipment and machinery and flood protecting the service lines. So they're actually doing additional things that protect the public utilities as well as protect the utilities that serve the building.
So it's an increased service.
So they're, yeah.
Let me just ask a question. So, I think the last really big flood was in 2004, right? It was really bad in Biltmore Village. What was in in these two buildings at that time? Do you know?
I
How much damage
believe
done?
Wasn't it
the
retail?
current,
It was retail.
I think the current person in to Brook Street. The
mountain
the naturalist.
Oh, yeah.
I think they were in there, because I think they were there when I was in college.
Yeah, I
in
think
college.
that's correct.
How much damage was, I mean, because that's what we're trying to prevent, right? The things that happened in 2004.
They were considered, I don't know if I can legally say how much damage. Because some of that is, I don't know. They're in a repetitive loss zone, but that's because we had 2 floods that occurred a week apart from each other. And a repetitive loss is an insurance claim over $1,000
Okay,
within a 10-year time period.
okay.
So they had 2 insurance claims for both of the buildings because of the 2 floods, because Ian and Francis came about a week apart, so they were deemed 2 different flood events. So 2 different insurance claims. One only did 1 insurance claim on one of the buildings, and they weren't that big. Less than $100,000, I think. I'm pulling this from looking at data 3 weeks ago. So I can probably look it up, but so
That was the direction of my questions.
yeah,
I'm curious about the hardships.
right.
So this is a hardship that another retailer is going to face.
Yes. Or anyone going in these buildings. I mean, that's the,
Thank you.
sure.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment in this case? There not being anyone, I will close the public comment and ask if there is a motion. We are voting on both at the same time.
Motion to approve. I said motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion from the board?
I feel like they're bringing the buildings into compliance as much as humanly possible in the historic district, and anything that's in Biltmore Village is prone to flooding. There's only so many structures that are in Biltmore Village that are going to have this unique situation where they have to request a variance, and I think that they're doing as much as they can to comply with the regulations.
I see it as an improvement. I agree.
Any other discussion? Board members, when I say your name, please say aye or nay. Ms. Gotzi?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. White?
Aye.
And Paul Wazinski says aye. So the request for the variance is approved. There is no other business this month. Before we adjourn, I should be able to talk off the top of my head, but I write everything down. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the board for the service that they provided this year. And I also want to thank the City of Asheville staff, a number of whom are not here, because it's not their type of case, for the hard work they've been doing in preparing and presenting cases before this board. I wish you all a happy holiday season and a Merry Christmas. If there is no objection, we will adjourn the meeting. Are there any objections?
Nope.
If there are none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.